Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast Hockey. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on everything to do with the Columbus Blue Jackets. My name's Cameron.
I'm Noel.
And I'm Nick.
Let's get into it.
There were really only three key additions that the Columbus Blue Jackets made this offseason. The most recent third overall pick, Adam Fantilli, Ivan Provorov, and Damon Severson. More on those guys later.
On to the key subtractions. Mostly minor league defensemen and forwards, including Gavin Bayreuther, who went to the Stars, and Lane Peterson, Michael Hutchison, among others. Really nothing to look at. Clearly, the additions are the key part of this offseason for the Blue Jackets, despite being only three.
Speaking of which, we're going to get more into those two big additions that the Columbus Blue Jackets made this offseason, beginning with Ivan Provorov. Ivan Provorov is a defensive defenseman who's coming from Philadelphia by way of a three-way trade with the Los Angeles Kings. The Los Angeles Kings took a chunk of his salary as part of the deal to get out from under the Cal Peterson contract. You're not going to see a lot of points from him. 27-point season is relatively good for him, but he is a guy who put up 97 hits last year and 162 block shots. So he's going to really help Columbus defensively and physically, not so much offensively.
Damon Severson came over to the Blue Jackets from the Devils in a sign-and trade, and he signed a massive 8-year, $6.25 million AAV contract. This is a bit risky due to the 8-year term. You never know how these defensemen are going to progress later into the career. He is 29, so age could catch up to him on the latter half of this contract. He's a well-rounded two-way defenseman. Last year, he put up, what is that? I can't do the math right now. That's 33 points, if my math is correct, in 81 games. And that was a bit of a regression from the season before that. He had 46 points just 2 seasons ago. He's not overly physical. He had 44 hits last season, but he did block 115 shots. So there is some peripheral stats there.
Moving on to the future outlook for the Columbus Blue Jackets. The big one there is obviously Adam Fantilli, as we're going to get into with Nick in a second here. But the third overall pick from the most recent draft, many people thought he should have gone second overall. I happen to be one of those people. David Jiricek, by some considered the best defensive prospect in the world. Denton Mateychuk, another great defensive prospect. Jordan Dumais, I think is how you pronounce it, and Gavin Brindley are all three good prospects there as well.
And you guys can see the draft capital. They still have a fair amount of picks here. They may look to move some of these guys as they are starting to try and compete a bit more and get out of this long rebuild they've been through. Um, Also looking to add to their already stacked prospect pool with some of these picks.
Moving on to the three main prospects in our Columbus Blue Jackets prospect spotlight. Firstly, we look at Adam Fantilli, the huge fall off from the 1, 2, 3 picks in the past draft. You thought Bedard and him were going to be top two, and then look, he ends up in Columbus at number 3. This is a huge pick for the Columbus Blue Jackets franchise and their legacy. As we know, they've been around for only 10 or so odd years. Into the mid-2000s. But look at Adam Fantilli as the future of this lineup. He's already going to be thrusted into that second-line center position, likely going into next season. We'll talk about the lineup more later. But Adam Fantilli, as you can see, in college, as a freshman, he put up really great points there. Almost 70 points, almost 2 points a game, frankly. And that 6'2" frame doesn't strike many as being huge, but he plays very big style of play where he can sort of attack the puck, win battles, and be a nice offensive piece in any situation, shoot from anywhere. Great playmaker as well, as you can see by 35 assists in 36 games alone. The second prospect of mention is David Jiricek. This is a guy that has been very, very impressive in his very first AHL year coming over from Europe. This is a guy who put up 38 points in 55 games on the AHL Columbus team, and this is a guy that I could see going right to the NHL next year. And if not, it'd be kind of surprising because this is one of the most touted prospects in all of hockey. He's also only 19 years old at this point, way over 200 pounds and 6'3", so this is a defenseman that shoots right shot as well. So you're looking at a guy who everyone would want in their prospect pool, a huge right shot, offensive, crafty, skilled defenseman. Now on the left side of defense, you've got Denton Mateychuk. This is a guy who many thought would go a little higher than 12, but many thought could also go a little lower than 12. This was a questionable guy coming into the draft, picked number 12 by Columbus in 2022. As you can see, Columbus picked up 2 defensemen within 6 picks in their 2022 draft selections. So this is a great chunk of business for the Columbus Blue Jackets, looking at Matejchuk as another offensive piece. You can see his WHL numbers there. Any WHL defenseman to do more than a point per game is going to prove very nicely for an NHL transition, and I could see him fitting very well into the AHL lineup next year.
That could be the future top pair for the Columbus Blue Jackets for years to come with both of those guys.
Yep, the future is bright for sure.
Moving on to the present day lineup. Obviously, you see the first line there. You got Johnny Gaudreau, Boone Jenner, and Patrick Laine. It is possible that Adam Fantilli slides up into that 1C role later on in the season. Mike Babcock's not really known for trusting young players right away, so we'll have to see there. Kind of depends how he plays early on. But what I do like is that second line is a lineup of kids. You got Kent Johnson, Adam Fantilli, and Kirill Marchenko. Marchenko is kind of an underrated player, in my opinion, who put up some really good goal totals last year and honestly started to float his name around in the Calder Cup contention. Emil Bemstrom is one player who I think is probably playing above his weight in this lineup. That spot could end up being taken over by Alexander Texier later on in the season. Cole Sillinger, I think, is a really solid third line center who has a lot of upside, and Jack Roslovic. This shows you how much they've added down the center this offseason. He was the second or first line center last season. So pushing him to the third line right wing says a lot. And then Eric Robinson, Sean Corrali, and a guy I really like in Liam Foudy, starred for Canada at the World Juniors, such a fast player and plays pretty physically as well. And then you look there at the extras. As I mentioned before, you got Texier, Olivier, China Kochov, and Danforth. So Olivier is a tough customer. They just re-signed this offseason, I believe. So, but lots of options there. Lots of guys who played in the NHL last season.
Is Texier back? I know he took a leave of absence
He's
for
back
last
this
season.
year.
He's back. Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
He's pretty good. He was good 2 years ago. I remember.
yeah, Texier's a guy you can play very few minutes and put up great goals per 60 and points per 60. So he's one of those guys like in a shelter role could do very well for the team if he's given the chance again. It might take him a year to kind of get back to NHL speed though. And two other guys that I would like to point out, Liam Foudy and Yegor Chinnikov. Once two touted prospects from Columbus alone. Columbus thought they were going to be like sort of part of their future at that time. Liam Foudy being a mid-teens round pick and Yegor Chinnikov being such a surprise that even Bob McKenzie didn't know who he was on draft day. So these are two guys that Columbus was very high on, and now they're sort of filtering through the bottom of the lineup a few years into their careers. So I'd be curious to see whether they sort of take charge this year. Do they earn their spot in the lineup, or are they going to be banished to the AHL again and sort of like take that hit of confidence out of them?
Liam Foudy's a guy I'd love to see get a chance on another team. I think just with the speed, he should be playing higher up in the lineup, but I think no matter what, he's going to get a lot of games here. And yeah, so moving on to the defense here.
Now onto the defense, you've got a very interesting decor compared to last year. Columbus Blue Jackets fans may remember that very few of these players listed in the top 6 here are part of the team last year. Zach Rowinski fell down to injury last year, unfortunately, so now he is back and healthy and ready to take charge this year as the primary defensive option for the Columbus Blue Jackets. You're looking at additions Ivan Provorov and Damon Severson taking out the top 4 with Andrew Peeke that we've slid up there to give Eric Branson some easier minutes on the third pair alongside Jake Bean. Notably among the extras, we see a large amount of defensemen waiting in the wings. You've got Adam Boquist, who was once a primary option and a key piece in trades that brought him to Columbus. You've also got Nick Blankenberg, who played serviceable minutes last year and proves to be an NHL quality defenseman, as well as Marcus Bjork, Tim Burney, and you've got the prospect David Jiricek we talked about earlier, among other defensive options in their system that could try for minutes as well.
This is a tough goaltending core. There's no sugarcoating at all. Elvis Merzlikins has had some good years in the past, but it seems like he's lost this game. He's really fallen off a cliff. The past 2 seasons he's posted miserable numbers. Daniil Tarasov got 17 games last year, and didn't show anything of promise. And then Jet Greaves posted a sub 900 save percentage in the AHL last year. So all three of these guys aren't needle movers. They aren't going to be stealing wins very much for the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is a big weakness for them, and we'll see if they address it at the trade deadline.
Moving on to the storylines for this Columbus Blue Jackets team heading into the offseason. The first one here is, as Nick alluded to during the lineups, just they have a incredible surplus of NHL caliber defensemen here. There's a couple other teams that are in a similar position. I look at the Nashville Predators as one, but no team has as many NHL caliber defensemen right now as the Columbus Blue Jackets. So from left to right there, we got Andrew Peeke, Jake Bean, Adam Boqvist, Marcus Bjork, Nick Blankenberg, and not even pictured there are David Jiricek and Tim Burney. The thing is, one of these guys or a couple of these guys are probably going to get traded during the preseason or at the start of the season because there's no way you can just bury all of these guys in the minors. A lot of them would be waiver eligible. And then the reason Jiricek and Burney aren't pictured there is because there's no chance of trading Jiricek. That's just not going to happen. And Tim Burney is still an RFA. But in terms of the defensemen listed here, guys, who would you look to move if you're GM Jarmo Kekalainen?
I think Andrew Peake's value would be pretty high. You don't he's right shot, right?
Yep.
Right shot defenseman. You don't see a lot of big physical right shot defensemen that are young and still at a reasonable contract moved very often. So I think he could get quite the haul. Adam Boqvist was brought over from Chicago, I believe. He's posted some solid numbers in sheltered roles. A good power play quarterback last year until he got injured. So I feel like he also has some value. Really, you'll get value for any one of these guys. So it's just really who Columbus feels that they see the least in and they want to move.
Yeah, keep in mind that Boqvist came over in the Seth Jones trade, and not that everyone was thinking that this is like the replacement for Seth Jones necessarily because of all the picks that came in the trade, but this is a former 8th overall pick that is really looking to find his game and become the premier offensive defenseman that he was supposed to be out of junior. So I look at Adam Boqvist as like, how many more chances are you going to get? And now you've got him as an extra in the lineup. Mm-hmm. Andrew Peeke and Goodbranson are above him as well as Severson on the top pair. So this guy's not going to get many more chances to prove himself. I'd also look at the one-way contracts. You got like Peeke and Goodbranson. Goodbranson's not going to be moved, but Blankenberg and Peeke are both on one-way deals, and you've got a lot of guys that are going to be on two-way deals. I think Bjork and Burney are going to be on two-way deals. You've also got Nicholas Milosh on a PTO. This is a guy that's bounced around the league a bit in the San Jose Sharks system as well, was once a pretty touted prospect out of the queue. So all of those guys are going to be competing, and I could see many of them just buried in the AHL, but this is an interesting dilemma to be in where they actually played meaningful minutes last year.
With Goodbranson, I mean, the second that deal was signed, I think it was a head scratcher to everybody in the NHL community, a 4x4 contract for a physical bottom pair defenseman just didn't make any sense. So I wonder if they explore maybe sending him down in the minors if things aren't going well with him, because I can't envision him getting claimed. I wouldn't expect it, but they have so many NHL caliber defensemen and they're not going to be able to carry them all. In terms of trade, I definitely think Andrew Peeke is the guy to go here. You already have Goodbranson, who's a physical defensive defenseman, and you brought in Ivan Provorov. I think teams will be willing to trade an arm and a leg to get him, particular teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs who need help on the right side, need some more physicality in their lineup. And I know he doesn't have favorable underlying numbers, but this is a guy who moves players from the front of the net, blocks shots, and hits people. So,
and he's still young, so
exactly.
Room to grow.
And a reasonable cap hit. I believe it's 2.75 for a couple more years.
Yeah, so 3 years left on that one. So
exactly.
Controlled.
So, good deal. Yeah. All right. Moving on. As Noel said, this goaltending tandem is, in my opinion, the second worst in the NHL, just ahead of Chicago. It's unfortunate to say because Elvis Merzlikins is a guy that I had really high hopes for. I had him in fantasy in his breakout year, and it was a great ride. In the first 3 seasons of his career, he put up a 923, a 916, and a 907. And we're not talking about in small sample sizes. We're talking about around 30 games or more each of those seasons. So he was such a promising goalie. It's just really sad to see him last season fall off so hard. He had a 876 in 30 games, which is horrific. Like that's horrible. So if this team wants to go anywhere at all this season, he needs to bounce back. Luckily for him, he's got a much improved decor in front of him, but there's no security behind him either. With Daniil Tarasov, he put up an 892 last year in 17 games, 3.91 goals against. Jet Greaves, or Graves, as Noel said, is the third option there, and he put up a sub 900 last year in the AHL. So I guess the point being here is if they get off to a slow start this season, this is a team I would look for with all their draft capital, all their prospects to be in on John Gibson, Connor Hallebuck, and Carter Hart.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to go into the season with Mers Lincolns as your starter.
Yeah,
What do you say his save percentage was last year? 876, 867?
876.
876. That's absolutely brutal to have as your starting goalie. This is a guy that you is going to be the workhorse there. I mean, he doesn't have
Yeah,
anyone. It's not a tandem. This is your one, like this is your A option. It's not a 1A, 1B situation. This is your A option. And having him post that season last year, they're really going to need a bounce back from him if they want to move forward as a team and take a step forward this year.
Yeah, I wonder if Merzlikins is one of those goalies that maybe thrives under a tandem.
mm,
As soon as Korpisalo left, or as soon as it became clear that they were going to try to trade Korpisalo for the past couple years, that kind of maybe seeped into his gameplay potentially, as he has soon faltered and fallen off the cliff, as we've mentioned. So I wonder if maybe they brought in another goalie that, like, you've seen people like Vitek Vanacek sort of revamp his career with a new team under a tandem model. So maybe someone like another guy like that could come in to Columbus and sort of help Merzlikins out, carry the load a bit, and maybe give him some nights off against tough teams, so there he can play against, if he needs to revamp his career against all the bottom teams, maybe that's the way to go, and put Tarasov in and see what happens. But yeah, this goaltending duo is by far the one of the weakest in the league, and I'd argue that next year, even if they're suffering, I think they're going to have to just ride it through, because I don't think their outlook was very good coming into this year. Anyways, they're not probably seeking for playoffs. So we'll see what happens with the goaltending, though.
yeah. Moving on to our last storyline here. It's just it's, it's almost unfortunate to be talking about this early on in the season, but it's just the drama with Mike Babcock already. This is a guy who has an extensive rap sheet of previous incidents. We're talking about the incident with Mitch Marner, where he made him list the players on the team by work ethic and then revealed it to his teammates. Johan Franzen said that Mike Babcock essentially put him into a state of depression. He had a bunch of run-ins with Mike Commodore in Detroit and Anaheim. This is the guy who benched Mike Modano so that he could not play his 1,500th game. And he also benched Jason Spezza in the home opener for the Toronto Maple Leafs, his hometown. So this is a guy who's got a track record of kind of letting his ego get the best of him. And I'm positive this is not the start that general manager Jarmo Kekalainen was hoping for when he signed Babcock earlier in the summer. It's just kind of comical, really, that we're already talking about his antics this early into the season.
Yeah, we shouldn't even have to talk about Mike Babcock. He shouldn't have gotten another job. That's just my opinion, but
Yeah.
I'm saying it out here for you guys. I don't know how many of you heard of the controversy that Spittin' Chicklets revealed, where he um, there's been like multiple sides to this. I know the Blue
Yep.
Jackets and the NHL have released statements where this stuff wasn't true, but he called in players and made them show pictures on their phone.
Hmm.
That's according to Biz Nasty from Spittin' Chicklets. Obviously, Mike Babcock and the NHL say otherwise. So it's really who do you believe? Just finger pointing at this point. But it's just not a good way to start the season of an already controversial hiring from Mike Babcock.
Yeah, especially for such a small market team, this is not the buzz that you wanted to get, especially with all these new exciting players like Adam Fantilli. You've got another year of Kent Johnson, who can do things like the Michigan. You've got so many exciting players. You've got Johnny Gaudreau staying put, and you've acquired defensemen such as Damon Severson and Ivan Provorov. And yet the big story coming into the 2023-2024 Columbus Blue Jackets season is, what did Mike Babcock do with his players in their opening meetings? That should not be the story. That should not be why Columbus is famous to start the season. That is infamous, and that is just unreal why this is a situation for the Columbus Blue Jackets so far. Yeah, it begs the question, well, what the hiring process was, but we can't really go into that because we don't know what's happened behind the scenes. Mike Babcock has a history of doing this kind of stuff, and it's just really unfortunate that these young guys are subjected to that nonsense.
It is kind
The
of funny
NHL,
because, oh, sorry, go ahead.
the NHL being an old boys club narrative has been pretty prevalent for a while, and I think this signing just really reinforces that. Like an old white dude gets a job that he has no reason he should be getting other than the fact that he has connections on the inside. It's disgusting to see.
And we don't know
I
how much he's making. Like, I'm sure you can understand that he would command a high salary. $6 million he made in Toronto, somehow that became a public knowledge. So it's curious to see, like, how much money are they putting in to this to also have to put out the fires that he creates.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing to me is I think he went to Columbus because it's a small market and he was going to be able to keep a low profile there. But at the end of the day, I think this is a guy who's probably one of the best X and O coaches in the NHL. He's a great tactician, and that's ultimately why he got this job. But it's time and time again shown that he's let his own ego get in the way of his own success. So it's unfortunate to see because in a perfect world, he'd probably still be in Toronto, but that didn't happen because of the way he treated his players, and he just ended up flaming out there. But with the incident that's happened recently here, I mean, I think it's very unsubstantiated, but the players who were vulnerable in that situation, there's no chance they're going to say anything. The younger players on the team, I've heard that from a couple sources. The only players we've heard from are Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau, who are well-established veterans with lots of years remaining on their contracts. So whether they were comfortable or not really isn't a question. It's more these young guys like Adam Fantilli, David Jiricek, some of these guys that are just coming to the NHL. It's very possible he pushed them the wrong way right off the bat.
I wonder, is Mike Babcock the best X and O's coach right now in 2023? I'd
Didn't
argue
say
that,
didn't
like,
say best, but
yeah, one of
I
the
think
best.
one of them probably. One of them.
Like, I'd argue that he is one of the coaches in the NHL currently. But as you look to be more innovative as a team, you're looking for new ideas, new perspectives, and someone that has brought this negativity to a franchise already within a few months of being hired just shows a lot of red flags already for why that happened. And I could see so many replacements. Like we saw in Dallas recently with Jim Montgomery, unfortunately how it ended with his substance abuse issues, but happy to see him back working with Boston and had a terrific season with the Bruins last year. But the way he started was being such an amazing college coach with the X's and O's, brought that to the NHL, immediately made a bad Dallas team way better, and sort of brought like glory to a team that didn't have much of it for a couple of years. So I think someone like that, you look to new perspectives. I don't think this is the way to go for a team that especially is during a rebuild and has new players that are going to want to learn the modern game rather than the 2008 Detroit Red Wings game, you know?
He may be the
Yeah.
best chalkboard X's and O's coach, but I don't know about his projector and computer screen.
Can't ever play that, yeah.
I think if you get in the first game and he's rolling all four lines indiscriminately, you'll know he hasn't changed because that's what he was notorious for in Toronto. He wouldn't give anybody any special attention. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Only time will tell. I mean, he was preaching that he changed, and uh, back in the day, he was an innovative guy. So hopefully he's able to refine that because this is a team that desperately needs some good things to happen for them.
Yeah.
Moving on to our final segment here, we have the overall overview for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So to begin with, the offseason grade, this doesn't account for the Mike Babcock hire, but strictly looking at bringing in Ivan Provorov and Adam Fantilli and Damian Severson, I think those are three solid players. What brings this down from an A or an A plus is just the term on the Damian Severson contract. The fact that it's going to take him to age 37 is very scary, but regardless, three great additions. In terms of the on-ice strength here, we have an offensive strength that's C plus. I think they get a lot better with Fantilli, but they're still not quite there yet. Defensive strength is up to a B plus. Definitely the area they improved in the most this season. They're going to get back a healthy Werenski. They're adding Severson and Provorov, who on a lot of other teams would be the primary defenseman. So it's a really good decor there, in my opinion. But the big question is, it going to be able to uplift that goaltending, which we have slotted at a D plus, right above Chicago at a D. So believe it's probably the second or third worst goaltending duo in the NHL. Really hope Elvis Merzlikins can bounce back. In terms of the future outlook, we got an A minus just because of the amount of top tier prospects they've been able to accrue and some of the young players they have on their team like Marchenko and Johnson.
Yeah, we'll see if this defensive core can carry them higher in the standings. But right now we have them eighth in our projected Eastern Conference standings. That's just really due to the fact of their goaltending tandem. It's really going to drag this team down. So unless a miracle happens where Merzlikins refines his form, they're going to be stuck in the bottom half of the league, the eighth in the projected Eastern Conference standings.
And what's
In
great
terms
about
of
this team, is that there is low expectations. There are low expectations for this team. There is really no bar, at least not externally, to reach for the Columbus Blue Jackets. No one's thinking they're going to be the division winners or a playoff team. So this is a chance for them sort of to take that underdog mentality into next season and see what they can do.
Yep. In terms of our individual rankings, Nick had them 27th, Noel had them 27th, and I had them 23rd. Just thinking that D will be a little bit of a crutch for them. To result in an aggregate ranking of 26th overall in the league, and that's why they're 7th in our series today. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you guys tune into the next installment of our season previews, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.